Hey guys, what's going on? In this video, we'll be learning about functions. So functions by definition are a chunk of code that you can use repetitively again and again in a program to save your time, effort, and also makes your program look cleaner. So to understand it more better, let's actually start by describing a function. To describe a function, you start with a def keyword and then pass the name of the function. Let's pass the name of the function as display, and you need to put opening and closing brackets like this and put a colon and press enter. For a moment, I won't be defining anything inside the display for now, so I will just type pass and come back. So the importance of typing pass is that if you want to describe anything or define anything later inside an intended block, you can put pass and come out. So if suppose in the previous lecture we learned about conditionals, and suppose if you want to say if x, and suppose if I don't want to describe anything inside it, I can't just come directly back because it's an error. So if I want to describe anything later, I can just type pass after coming out, and if I want to just edit later, I will just remove pass with some logic. That's why I put pass here. So we'll be filling out the display function very soon. So now let's call our function. So to call our function, we say this, we put the name of the function and we put the round brackets. So this would actually call the above display function right here. So the one thing to be noticed is that I need to put round brackets to execute the function. Okay, I'll tell you what I just meant by this. Let's actually print the display without the round brackets. In this case, we are not executing whatever is written inside the display. So let me print it. So it will just give me an object reference, that is function display is at this memory location. So what it does is, if you just write display without round brackets, what it does is it just gives back the memory location. It doesn't execute whatever is written inside the display function. So if I just put simple round brackets and if I try to run it, you notice that the same same output won't be there. Now you'll understand the essence of using round brackets when we learn more about closures, when we learn about decorators and things like that. And these will be covered in the intermediate Python tutorial, so that when you are confident enough, you would be having a strong base to understand those concepts, and you'll understand much better in that intermediate Python level. So for now, let's understand that by using a round bracket, it will execute whatever is written inside the function. So here it displayed me none. That's because the function is not returning anything. So let's actually type a code inside it. So for that, I will remove pass and let's print hello world. Now if I try to print a display, or if I simply say if I try to run display, what it does is it goes and fetches this display function and it will print hello world over here. So I don't need to type print display here because by default it's printing hello world. If I try to run it, you see it's printing my hello world. That's because I just called my function here and the function got executed because we put round brackets inside function. We written print hello world and that got executed and got reflected over here. Okay, so you might ask, hey, but how is function useful? It's making things complicated, right? Well, it's not. So let me actually comment these things out. Let me actually comment this one out. Cool. Suppose you are writing a program and there are certain places that you want to print hello world. So you just keep on writing print hello world on line number 1, and say at line number 20 you put another print hello world, and let's say line number 112 you put another hello world, and on and on and on. So it will definitely print the hello world from those locations. And suppose what you want to do is, hey, no, I don't want to print hello world. Let's say I want to print hello world instead. In this case, since you are hard coded the print values in everywhere, you would have to locate all the print functions manually, and you would have to replace them with hello world. And then if you have to run it, you'll get the desired output. Now here comes the function's power. So instead of doing this kind of thing, what I can do is I can define a function. Let me uncomment it. Okay. And the same way, suppose if I say display at line number 1 and display at line number the same scenario, we are just considering the same scenario. And now if I want to change, okay, let me run it. You'll see it will print 3 times hello world. Okay, now if I want to change the single word, change this to say hello world, what I can do is I just need to remove the L, and you would see that it would be automatically reflected everywhere. So it might not be a problem if your program is really small, but if you are writing a really large program and you want to replace certain aspects or based on requirements you have, if you want to bring the changes, functions are really helpful. Because suppose if there are hundreds of thousands of places where you have put on hello world, you can't just manually just put find and replace, right? For that you need to use a function. Now not only functions help you in this, function also makes look code cleaner. And this type of programming is what we call dry programming. Okay, let me actually, okay, dry programming. So what dry means, don't repeat yourself. So functions play a crucial role in this type of programming. So dry is kind of a concrete concept when it comes to Python. So good and ideal programmers don't repeat the values that they use, or you can say don't repeat the concepts again and again. So instead of printing hello world, hello world, hello world everywhere, you can just make use of a function and you can just call that function everywhere instead of repeating that. Okay, now let's talk about return keyword a bit. Now, when you execute the function, what should that function return? If you want to specify what the function should return, you can make use of the return keyword. Cool. Now let's make use of that. Now here we directly used print function, which actually displays the output on the screen. It's not actually return. If you want to return something, we can make use of return. So let's say return, and let's return the string hello world. And over here, okay, let me actually run it. So you will see, hey, it's not displaying anything. Now the reason is that when I call this display function, it's just simply returning me this string value. Now if you want to print it to the screen, you have to type print, then display this to the screen. So let me just code it and just paste it here. Now you would see that when I call the display function, it goes inside the display function and fetches the return value, and the return value is a string hello world, and it plugs the return value inside the print function, and now it should print the hello world. Now let's actually go ahead and write some code inside display. As I told you before, we can also write codes inside functions. Let's actually declare a variable, say x equals to 2, and let's say y equals to 3. Now what I want to do, I want to return x, so I would say return x. Now if I do print display, it will print me 2. That's because x here is 2 and we are returning the variable x value inside the variable x. Now if that x gets plugged in here and we just printing 2. In the similar way, we can also print y and we can run it. There you go. And we can also perform some operations. Say I want to return x plus y. In this case, let's return 2 plus 3, which is 5. So it should also print me 5, because the result of x plus 5 is plugged inside the print function using display. Remember that in strings and this and other things, we made use of something called len function. Well, this is also a kind of inbuilt function which actually takes in the argument, say a string, say a password, and just returns the length of that. Let me go ahead and print that. So if I try to print len of password, it would print me 8, because I made use of len function and passed an argument inside. And we will just come back to argument, what arguments are right now. And len, what it does, it takes the argument and returns the computed length of that string. So there also the inbuilt function makes use of return to give us an integer value. Okay, so that was all about return. Now let's talk about arguments, because we just learned about arguments. Let me quickly go ahead and type arguments. Okay, let me type args instead. Okay, let me clear the screen as well. Now, okay, let me actually remove this one because we are displaying a message. So let's type print hello world. That's better. And let's call the function display. Okay, so what I mean by arguments is that suppose you want to take something inside the function. So you are explicitly saying, hey, inside the display, take this value and use this value. So let's say, let's take hello world. Let me put, say, point. And I'm saying, hey, take this point value inside the function and use it somewhere. So to make use of it, we have to give a variable name. Let's say message, and after that, let's print message along with the hello world. Now, if I try to run it, you will see it will print me hello world point. The reason is we passed a string point inside display, and the point is being accessed by the message variable, and it made use of that point variable here. Now suppose what happens if I don't make use of message at all, and let me remove this message, and you will notice that it will give me an error. The reason why is that it says, hey, display takes 0% arguments but 1 was given. The reason is display here takes no arguments, but you have given an argument point, so you must mention a variable, or you can say argument there. Now this will work perfectly, even though it won't print hello world point because we haven't made use of this variable. Now there are certain cases where you want to display multiple arguments, say point, mask, and things like that. One thing to do is you can put multiple variables, say message, message2, and things like that, and you can make use of them inside the print function. Now let's talk about something called default arguments. Now default arguments is also called keyword arguments. Now these keyword arguments are by default defined inside the function. So suppose, let's say instead of mask, I'm just passing point, and if I by default assign my message to a value of mask, and if I come inside and print message and message2, and if I try to run it, you will notice it will print me hello world point mask. That's because although we only passed one argument here, the parameter got hold of this point, and in message2 it by default got the value that we assigned. Now one thing to tell you before that, suppose what happens if I just remove this, it will still give me an error because it's expecting 2 arguments but we are giving only 1. That's because we declared message2 here and we didn't pass anything to define it. So you can put something of a value like this, and then you can make use of it. And in this case, I won't also have to pass 2 data. I can just pass a single data. Now, although you can also pass the second data, say I want to pass OLED, and if I try to run it, you will notice something interesting. This time it printed point and OLED. That's because the message2 will get overridden by the argument that you pass inside when you call the display function. That's all about keyword arguments. Now one thing to notice is that message is what we call the positional argument, and message2 equals to mask is what we call the keyword argument. Now positional arguments cannot come after the keyword argument. So let me switch the places, say message2 equals to mask, and if I put comma, if I type message, you will see that Visual Studio Code is throwing me an error. If I just hover over it, it says, hey, non-default argument follows default argument, which means here this is a default argument which is prior to the non-default argument, or you can say positional arguments are coming after the non-positional arguments. So in Python this is not allowed, so that's why it threw us the error. So let me come back. Okay, so let me actually delete this message to a message all becoming ramped up. Now as I told you before, you can assign any number of keyword arguments after the positional argument. So if I can also type message3 equals mask key and things like that, and I can run it without causing an error because I'm having positional arguments before the keyword argument. So okay, one more thing to say is that I could also pass it inside the function like this. So if I just type comma, and if I just go back and print it again, message3 equals to pointy. Now in this case, let me actually print message3 itself because we are just manipulating message3, and if I try to run it, you notice that it will override the mask key value here. Now that's one more way you can actually assign the keyword argument, by just saying, hey, message3 equals to pointy. That means it will access the message3 argument and replace the value inside it with pointy. Cool. So that was all about the multiple argument passage. Now let's talk about something more practical. So whenever you're writing a function, you don't actually know how many variables you're going to pass inside it. So let's actually delete all of it. Let's just define a new function, say define let's say add, and inside add, I don't know how many positional, how many keyword arguments I'm gonna pass. And before I move further, I know that's by kind of tricky and it trips many people off, especially beginners, when I say about positional arguments and keyword arguments. So just know that positional arguments are those arguments that you do not assign without equals to sign. So whenever I say something like message equals to that value, and if I pass this value inside the function, this is what we call as the keyword arguments. And if you just pass directly, just as we did like point, this is what we call as the positional argument. Now I hope you, I just wanted to tell this because many beginners who start off early get confused by this, and I hope you understand this. It also requires a bit of practice to understand it much better. I recommend you to experiment with these a lot so that you can actually understand the essence of using functions, and functions do really help. Okay, back on the track. Now I actually don't know how many positional arguments like message, message2, and keyword arguments like message3 equals to something, message4 equals to something. I don't know how many positional or keyword arguments I'm gonna pass. This is something very practical because we come across this every time. Let me just write pass again. Let me go ahead and call this function, and let me pass, say, 1, 2, 3, and keyword arguments like number equals to 4, another number equals to 5, like that. So here another equals to 5 and number equals to 4 are the keyword arguments, and 1, 2, 3 respectively are the positional arguments. Now at this point while you are writing, so let me actually comment this one out. I just gave an example, so let me comment this one. So when you're initially writing the function, you actually don't know how many values are you gonna pass. Here we make use of something called star args and star quarks. Now star args stands for arguments and star quarks stands for keyword arguments. Now let's go ahead and actually print each out. While you're calling, you just access it using star, and inside you can directly type the name. Similarly, let's print quarks. Cool. Now let's uncomment this because now we are defining the function saying, hey, add 1, 2, 3, and I want a number, say position, keyword argument say 4, and I am also passing another keyword argument say 5. So here you are passing a dynamic data. Now here, if you see above, star args will stand for all of those positional arguments, and star quarks will stands for all those keyword arguments. So let me go ahead and print it, and you will understand it much better. Now you will notice that all the positional arguments are displayed by args as a tuple, as you can see 1, 2, 3, and all the keyword arguments like number for another 5 is being displayed by quarks as a dictionary, as you can see here. Now a little more advanced topic that I think that it is necessary to cover here is that now instead of passing these long values like this, 1, 2, 3, number equal to 4, another equals to 5, it is actually better to have them declared as a list or dictionary. So what I mean is that we can always when we are working with star args and star quarks, we don't actually pass the plain hard-coded values like 1, 2, 3 just like we did earlier. So there's a convention where you want to make use of lists to pass the positional arguments and dictionaries to pass through the keyword arguments. So in order to do that, let's create a variable, say add list, and create a list of 1, 2, 3. And remember, these would be the positional arguments, or you can say this would be passed over to args. And let's pass the keyword arguments, say add list k stands for keyword, and here we won't be passing a list, we'll be passing a dictionary with number, and we pass the value 4 and another, and we pass the value 5, just like that. Now there's a small twist when you are going to put these inside, so you can't just directly type add list and add list k. It won't give you an error, but it will print in some weird way. So if I just run it, you would notice that it's actually giving me a tuple of both list and dictionary. So what it does, it's considered both as positional arguments. Now you want to segregate them as positional and keyword arguments, right? Now for that, what you can do is you can unpack the list. Now once again, these will be covered in the intermediate level of Python. So you can unpack a list by just putting a star, and you can unpack a dictionary by putting star star. Now here, that list would be unpacked to values like, should be like add, and list would be unpacked to something 1 2 3 as individual values, and the keyword arguments, that is add list k, would be unpacked to something like number equals to 4, another equals to 5, and so on. Now I once again want to emphasize that list unpacking, tuple unpacking, dictionary unpacking are all part of the intermediate, but it is really important to know now itself so that you won't find it really difficult. When we actually learn about intermediate Python, we'll be becoming much more clear about what we are learning. I actually told you this because this is the convention that good ideal programmers use, because some programmers just directly hardcode those values, and those really suck. And what if you actually have, say, add list as 100 values, or you want to populate the add list with 100 values? You can't actually go ahead and type 100 values here, right? That's really bad. So in those cases, it's really good practice to pass them as a list, all those positional arguments as a list, and all those keyword arguments as a dictionary. And then unpack those values before passing them to the main function add, and unpack the dictionary as well. All right, so those were all about functions. Hope you really like this video. So this marks the end of the basic Python tutorial. Now I'll be adding certain things when I feel like there are concepts that need to be more emphasized. I'll be adding it to the basic Python's playlist. And for now, this was all for the video. And if you really like this video, you can support us. And the simplest way to support it is to really like and subscribe. You can also spread the words to others if they want to learn about Python or any other tech stack, and support us and join the community. Alright guys, see you in the next video.